let's get started with the squad that we have just here. So welcome to the PotterTrail, everyone. Are we all excited?
Yes!
Excellent, that's the level of enthusiasm we're looking for, my friends. So for those who have not heard it already, my name is Sam, and I will be everybody's guide for the next 90 minutes or so as we go exploring the history and the origins of one of the greatest sagas of the modern age, that of Harry Potter. Now, the first half of the tour, my friends, is going to be in this graveyard around the corner just here. This is Greyfriars Kirkyard, and it's actually a spot that the author of Harry Potter, a lady called JK Rowling, used to go walking through all the time while she was working on the earlier books in the Harry Potter saga. While she was walking through there, she'd spot a few familiar names on one or two gravestones that she would use as the names for characters in Harry Potter. She would also see a few interesting old buildings that she'd take some details from to include as details for the School of Hogwarts. So we'll explore all of that stuff whilst we're in the graveyard, after which we'll head back out into the streets to visit some of the cafes and the restaurants in which JK Rowling was sat while she was writing this fantastic series of books. And then finally, the tour will conclude just at the other end of this street over here on Victoria Street, which is a curving cobblestone street that we understand to be the inspiration for the Wizarding Street of Diagon Alley, my friends. Now, I'll be honest, everybody, usually when I announce that last bit about Victoria Street being the inspiration for Diagon Alley, I get a kind of a pantomime style ooh from the crowd. I noticed we were quite quiet just there, so if you don't mind, we're going to try that again. I'm just going to give you the information and we'll do this properly, okay? So everyone, the tour will be about 90 minutes long and we'll conclude on a curving cobblestone street called Victoria Street, which is in fact the inspiration for the Wizarding Street of Diagon Alley, my friends. I know, right? So cool. So yeah, we're going to explore all of that stuff. Before we get properly stuck into it though, I'm just going to mention a quick couple of things before we get started. So thing number one, it's a very boring subject, but on the subject of money, so you may have read that this is a free tour, and I just want to quickly elaborate on, my friends. The tour is indeed free to come on in that we do not apply any kind of set ticket price. We want you to be able to enjoy this tour regardless of how much cash you happen to have with you. At the same time, whilst the tour is free to come on, that does not strictly mean that it is free to leave at the end, okay? So we operate a pay-what-you-feel system at the PotterTrail, my friends, okay? So at the very end of the tour, I am going to ask for a little donation, and it is just whatever you can spare, whatever you thought this experience was worth. I will mention to everyone, your average 90-minute walking tour in Edinburgh tends to go from anywhere from £10 to £20 per person. If you were able to match that, if you could manage that for yourself or for your group, I'd obviously be a very grateful little wizard, but it is at the end of the day, whatever you can spare and whatever you thought this experience was worth, okay? I also understand in the times of the coronavirus, maybe we're not all carrying cash on us, so I have recently invested in this incredible muggle device just here, my friends, a card machine, the real magic of the tour right here. So we'll process all that stuff at the very end though. For now, put all subject of money to the back of your mind. So if you guys have any questions about anything throughout the tour as well, questions are absolutely welcome. Please just pop your hand in the air and I will come to you as quickly as I can. Similarly though, my friends, I will have questions for yourselves, and these are going to be trivia questions all about Harry Potter. And if you answer a question correctly, you are going to find yourselves winning some Hogwarts House points. We do run a Hogwarts House competition throughout the tour. Now some of us may already know which Hogwarts House we belong to, but for those who are not aware, you have 4 houses to choose from. There is the Red House of Gryffindor, the Blue House of Ravenclaw, the Yellow House of Hufflepuff, and the Green House of Slytherin. Okay, so everyone have a wee think as to which house you would like to be in, and if you're not entirely sure as to your house, please don't panic. We might well have a sorting ceremony early on in the tour so we can find out for definite which house everybody is in, okay? Now the very final thing to mention, my friends, is on the subject of magic. This is a Harry Potter tour. Of course, we have to do some magic during the tour. So this will require everyone to have a wand. I would just now like to make sure that everyone is carrying some sort of wand. So please hold your wands up high, my friends. Hold them up in the air. Let's make sure that everyone is carrying something. Loving it, my friends. Yes, when you don't have a wand, the most magical finger is always a good thing to pick. It just means you're an extra powerful witch or wizard, for sure. All right, everyone, we have wands in the air. Fantastic. So, my friends, we are now going to learn the traffic light charm. This is called Rossio Lumos. It is an essential charm for us to be able to get through the tour, okay? So first of all, when learning a spell, the first thing you should always look at is stance. What is your cool spell casting pose? I usually find for myself, I've got my foot behind me like this, I have my wand in the air ready to go, and I have my serious face on, because magic is serious business, everybody. So everyone adopt a cool spell casting pose, if you will. Stand like you're going to do some magic. Loving it, sir. Dynamic. Very nice, my friends. Very good, very good. Oh yes, no, I like that. Very casual. Yeah. All right, my friends. So what we're going to do with the wands, you are going to do a swish and a flick, and as you do, you say the incantation. And the incantation for this spell is Rossio Lumos. And you have to do it like that. You do it with a deep, booming voice. Do it some gravitas, and you'll get that magic to flow. So let's try this all together just now, shall we, friends? Rossio Lumos, with a swish and a flick, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Rossio Lumos.
Fantastic, my friends. Very nice indeed. Okay, everyone, remember this spell. Keep practicing it to yourselves. We'll cast it together again in about 45 minutes' time. When we do so, our wands will be pointed at those sets of muggle traffic lights you see up there, my friends. And the effect will be minimal, but it will be quite funny. Now, let's explore this graveyard, shall we, my friends? Right this way. And we're going to go right the way to the back of Greyfriars Kirkyard. So let the PotterTrail commence. Friends, up we come, right this way. We're going to go all the way towards the back of the graveyard up here. So are you guys on holiday to Edinburgh yourselves?
Yes.
Yes, very good, very nice. And is this your first time in town?
Yes.
Have you been before?
Yeah.
Very nice, very good. So what have we been doing so far? Has it been quite a lot of sightseeing? Or?
Yeah, we were in London for a couple of days, then we went to Lake District, and
gorgeous.
now we are here.
Now you're here, very good, very nice. And then is there another stop after Edinburgh? Are you seeing more of it?
Yeah, then we'll go back to London for a couple of days and then we'll fly back.
And then fly back,
Yeah.
fair enough. Has this been your first time in Britain as a whole then
Yes,
as well?
yes.
Wow, amazing, very cool. So have you found the whole holiday? Is it all
Yeah, it's amazing. It's pretty good.
it's honestly, it's such
The weather has been kind.
Yeah, I know, you've been very lucky. I was a bit sad this morning when I came. I did another tour about 2 hours ago, and I came out, and as soon as I put the cloak on, the heavens opened. But it looks like it's eased up a little bit for just now, at least. Yeah. It's unusual for Scotland for us to not have rain. That's kind of like our typical state of being, you know. But yeah, what you do. So what do you have planned for your final few days whilst you're here? Is there anything
Yeah, a
special?
couple of...
Very good. You do have to do Arthur's seats, yeah. I will say, just make sure you have a hearty meal beforehand to make sure you've got the energy. I've been up Arthur's seat a few times, but the first time was about 10 years ago after I just moved here, and I was able to basically jog up to the top. It was no problem at all. But during the lockdown, I decided to walk up again as well during the pandemic, and I had to stop about 4 times on the way. Like, I discovered pizza and beer since the first time I went up, and now I was just like, whoa, it really took the energy out of me, to be honest with you. But yeah, you do Arthur's Seat, and then afterwards there's some very nice pubs that you can go into for a meal afterwards. Kilderkin is a very nice one down in that particular area. It's very near like the Parliament buildings and stuff, and that's where you can have a haggis and a whiskey afterwards and all the rest.
Nice.
Alrighty, my friends, why don't we kick it over to here? Round we come, gang, round we come. We just gather in as close as we can. Leave a bit of space for that so other members of the public can get by. Thank you very much indeed. So everybody, welcome to the rear of Greyfriars Kirkyard. Now this particular bit beyond the archway and the Flodden Wall just there, this is a location that JK Rowling would go walking around very often indeed while she was working on the first 2 or 3 books in the Harry Potter saga. While she was wandering around this particular area, she could see a few very interesting looking buildings to take some details from, to include as details for Hogwarts. The first of such buildings we're going to talk about is this one beyond the big black gates just here, my friends. So this is George Heriot School, and it's one of the more prestigious schools in Edinburgh, and for a very long time this one was credited as being the inspiration for the school of Hogwarts. Now, I should make clear that in this day and age, JK Rowling has taken to occasionally trying to correct this tour on Twitter, on which she has been known to post various things, some of which is to do with Harry Potter, some of which is a little bit more controversial, and if folks want to talk about the controversial stuff, my door is always open, as it were. But when it comes to talking about Harry Potter, Rowling has pointed out online that she did have some ideas about Hogwarts before she moved to Edinburgh. So she originally came up with both the idea for Harry and Hogwarts at the same time. This was in the year year 1990, so about 32 years ago, she was sat on a train that was travelling through England, and she describes it as Harry just suddenly popping into her mind's eye fully formed. And she could see him with the messy black hair, the round glasses, the lightning scar, and she could see him standing in front of a castle that would become known as Hogwarts. Now, a few years after she comes up with the ideas for Harry and Hogwarts just here, a few various things happened. She would move to Portugal for a few years, where she became an English teacher. She got married to her first husband here and had a child with this man called Jessica, and she was a teacher in Portugal for about a year and a half or so, coming up with loads of ideas for the Harry Potter saga. However, after about 18 months of marriage, she would divorce her first husband and then move to Edinburgh in December of 1993. And this is when she really set about trying to write her book series. And this is when certain buildings start to catch her eye, such as this fancy school building just here. So with George Heriot's, one such detail that inspired her at first is the idea that this school should be known to cater towards disadvantaged children, or children who have come from a disadvantaged background. To give you the history of this place, it's almost 400 years old. It was commissioned in 1628 by George Heriot, who was the royal goldsmith of Scotland at the time. He was a very wealthy, very charitable man. When he passed away, he had it written into his will that all of his money should go towards building this school that would educate the pure and fabulous bairns of Edinburgh. Which is Old Scots for poor and fatherless children. So kids who have lost a parent, who couldn't really provide for themselves, they'd be sent to this school to receive their education. So I like to think of it as being a school for children like Harry Potter and Neville Longbottom, children who suffered a tragic incident when they were very young, and then school time becomes the best time of their lives. Now, I'll be honest, my friends, it was several hundred years ago that this school was catering solely towards the attendance of fatherless children. However, the centuries have progressed. The school has gained a lot more prestige, and now we're all looking at one of the most expensive private schools in Scotland. I believe £20,000 a year was how much I was last quoted as costing to educate a child here. So it is quite expensive. Nonetheless, if you did have that amount of cash lying around and you could afford to send a youngster to be educated here, they would be delighted to arrive on their very first day of school and be sorted into one of the 4 school houses. This is the other thing we know was taken from George Heriot's school, and those houses are colour-coded appropriately as well. Over here we get a red house, a blue house, a green house, and a yellow house. Now, I could tell everyone which house is which and give you the names along with the colours immediately, but I feel like that would be a boring way to proceed. So instead, my friends, you can see I have here the sorting hat, the one and only sorting hat that I stole from the headmaster's office earlier today. It's definitely not a cheap old knockoff I bought from a Harry Potter shop a long time ago. Anyway, what I'm going to do, my friends, is I will give you the names of the houses from George Heriot's school, but just the names, not the colours, okay? And we're going to go through the list a few times, so you can consider each house carefully. I will then, at the very end, reveal the colours of the houses, and you can see which Hogwarts house you've been matched up with, all right? We'll get everyone to put their hands up to sort themselves into houses, and then we'll reveal the colours, and you'll see which Hogwarts house you're in. Does that make sense, everybody? Yeah?
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, so your first house at George Heriot's school is Lauriston. Okay? Lauriston. House number 2, Castle. Okay? So the big thing over there, Castle. House number 3, Rayburn. That's Rayburn. And then finally, house number 4, Greyfriars. Greyfriars. So your options are Lauriston, Castle, Rayburn, or Greyfriars. I'll go through the list one final time for everyone. Your options are Lauriston, Castle, Rayburn, or Greyfriars. So this time around, we're going to start putting our hands up, my friends. Who wants to be in Lauriston House? 1. Just you, madam. Okay, no, yeah, 2 of us just here. Fantastic, very good indeed. We have 2 for Lauriston. Thank you very much, very good, very nice. What about Castle? Anyone for Castle? A few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 for Castle. Very good, very nice. What about Rayburn? Who's for Rayburn? We have still a few. 1, 2, 3. Was that a hand up, madam? Or no, just waving? That's okay. No worries. Okay, our last one is Greyfriars. How many of us do we have for Greyfriars? A few. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Very good and very nice. All right, my friends. So I can reveal for everyone that if you wish to be in Gryffindor House at this school, it would in fact be Rayburn. Rayburn is the red-coloured house corresponding with Gryffindor for the bravest of Hogwarts pupils. After which if you wish to be in Ravenclaw, Castle is where you want to have your hand up. Castle is the blue-coloured house, corresponding with Ravenclaw for the more intelligent Hogwarts pupils. Now, Greyfriars is in fact the yellow-coloured house, my friends. This one corresponds with Hufflepuff, yep, for the humblest of Hogwarts pupils. And then finally, my Lauristons, we know what is left, don't we? Welcome to Slytherin House, my friends, for the most ambitious, the most cunning, and let's face it, folks, the most evil of Hogwarts pupils. Now, I should point out, if anyone is in any way dissatisfied with the house that they've ended up in, please don't panic, all right? You remember the sorting hat will take your opinion into consideration when you pop it on. For example, when Harry Potter first put on the sorting hat, the hat privately suggested that he would be great in Slytherin. Harry said, no, not Slytherin, and he ended up in Gryffindor. So you've all got the same opportunities just here, like my Ravenclaw friend. I noticed you had your hand up for Slytherin just there. Would you say you're more of a Ravenclaw, though, than a Slytherin? Yeah. Okay, well, welcome to Ravenclaw House then, my friend. All right, don't you worry. I've always had to make sure that everyone is happy, incidentally. Ever since a few months ago, I was doing the sorting hat bit just there, and there was a little boy on the tour who was about this tall, dressed in full Gryffindor regalia. He had round glasses that he poked the lenses out of. He'd drawn a lightning bolt on his forehead. He was determined that he was Harry Potter, and he was gonna be in Gryffindor. His father was with him, heard Greyfriars, and thought, son, Greyfriars begins with G. That must be Gryffindor. Put your hand up. The child put his hand up, found out he was instead in Hufflepuff, and just turned to his father and screamed, "You said that was Gryffindor!" And then he just marched over to that wall, sat down, and burst into tears. So it's just a bit of fun, okay, friends? I'll also make clear as well, they do not divide the children into different houses at George Heriot School using a magic hat and based on the differing personalities of the children. However, one rather interesting coincidence is that JK Rowling, now being a wealthy citizen of Edinburgh, could send her own children to be educated at this school, which is exactly what she did. She has 3 children in total. They were all educated at some point or another at George Heriot School, and all of her 3 children were sorted into the red-coloured house of Rayburn, much like the 3 main children of her story being sorted into the red-coloured house of Gryffindor. So there could be some correlation here, my friends. But I'll be honest, that is a theory that I have personally made up, and there is absolutely no further evidence to back it up whatsoever. Anyway, friends, we have one more thing to see in this part of the graveyard, and it is this plaque at the top with a little white circle on top of it just here. Why don't we gather up and have a little look at this fella? Sticking to the path as much as possible, though, please, guys. Try and avoid the grass, because it's horrible. Alrighty, everybody. So I'm hoping. Sorry, I should mention we shouldn't take photographs of the school just because it's still an active school. So I should have mentioned that before. But if you guys would like a photograph of this building, where the tour ends, you actually get a really nice view of George Heriot School in the distance. It'd be a really good place to take a picture from. I'll let you know about that spot at the end. Okay. For now, though, we're talking about this chappie up at the top just here, that of William McGonagall, my friends. And this is the man whose namesake was used for that of the Transfiguration teacher at Hogwarts. That of Professor Minerva McGonagall. And that is as far as the similarities go between Professor McGonagall and William McGonagall. Because William McGonagall was not a professor, nor was the man a witch. No, William McGonagall is famous for being a writer and a poet. He's not any ordinary poet, my friends, no. This man up here is yet more famous for being quite genuinely one of the absolute worst poets that Scotland has ever known in its entire history. Genuinely, the man wrote hilariously bad poetry that showed no grasp of meter, no grasp of verse. He used a really forced rhyming scheme, and he did this all to try and make people laugh with how terrible his poems were. At least that's what he told everyone. He tried to make people laugh with terrible poetry. He would often try and pick quite dark subject matter to write about, but try and spin it in a comic light so that people who were hearing his poems were being cheered up about a particular subject that had previously kept them down. I'll give you an example of one such terrible poem that was about a rather disastrous incident. This is the Tay Bridge disaster, which was a big incident that took place about 150 years ago in 1879. The Tay Bridge is a railway bridge crossing over the River Tay outside of the town of Dundee. In the year 1879, one stormy night, as a train was going across this bridge, it collapsed under the weight. It was a big disaster for the town. Everyone in Dundee was very, very sad. But then William McGonagall, who was living in Dundee at the time, took it upon himself to try and cheer everybody up by writing one of his famously terrible poems all about this particular incident to get everybody laughing again. I'll recite the first verse of this awful poem for you now. This is the Tay Bridge disaster, my friends. Ahem. Oh, beautiful railway bridge across the silvery Tay. Alas, I am very sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on this last Sabbath day of 1879, which shall be remembered for a very long time. You get the idea, it's not a very good poem. I always like doing that bit though, because there are some people that laugh and then there are other people who just look very confused as to what they've signed up for. They don't know what's happening. The point is that this man was loved for his terrible poetry, especially outside of Dundee. After he wrote the Tay Bridge disaster, William McGonagall was in fact hired by a circus outside of Dundee, where his stage name would become Mr. McGonagall, the best, worst poet in the world. And if ever you saw McGonagall here performing, with your ticket, you would also be handed a rotten tomato. And that was used for exactly what everybody thinks it was used for. McGonagall here performed his poetry whilst you tried to whack him with tomatoes and he danced about the stage. Now, I should point out, he really encouraged all of this daft behaviour. It was all part of his act and he was in on the joke. So I tend less so to think of this man as a failed poet. To me, William McGonagall is a pioneer in stand-up comedy. He's a really, really funny man. Now, the character of Professor McGonagall, that of a rather stern female Scottish teacher at a fancy old school, she is in no way based on the world's worst poet just here. But she is actually still based on someone from Scottish fiction, and this is the titular character from the prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is a novel from about 100 years ago or so, and tells the tale of a stern female Scottish teacher at a fancy old school in Edinburgh. She is quite strict with her pupils in the classroom, but then when she's away from her kids and she's in her own home or her own office, she speaks very lovingly of her pupils and wants them to have the most fulfilling lives that she can envision them having. So this sounds like this could well be a description of Professor McGonagall as well as of Miss Jean Brodie, but the similarities go a bit further yet still, because the prime of Miss Jean Brodie got made into a movie in the late 1960s, and it was the same actress, Maggie Smith, who portrayed this main character. And that is 30 years before she would appear as Professor McGonagall in the Harry Potter movies. And it's actually because she played Jean Brodie that Maggie Smith would later be cast as Professor McGonagall. Now, this was actually a casting choice made by the author, made by JK Rowling herself, when it came to adapting the very first book into a movie. She actually got to cast 3 actors all by herself for that very first movie, because she had them in mind as she'd been writing their characters. You've heard one of them just there, that of Maggie Smith as Minerva McGonagall, but I will give 10 house points each. Let's see some hands in the air. Who can tell me the other 2 characters that JK Rowling cast for that very first movie? These are established actors, so think of adult characters. Go for it.
Alan Rickman?
Very correct, my friend. What was your Hogwarts house?
Ravenclaw.
Ravenclaw,
Yeah.
10 points to Ravenclaw, my friend. Very well done. We tend to applaud when people get house points, everyone. It's tradition. And you're applauding yourself. That's a very Ravenclaw thing to do. I'm smart. Yeah, no, absolutely. It is Alan Rickman, the late and great Alan Rickman, as Professor Severus Snape. So yeah, Alan Rickman is quite well known in the 80s and 90s for appearing in Hollywood movies, usually playing villains. I think I first saw him as the Sheriff of Nottingham in 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, which if you haven't seen, do go and check out. It's a fantastic, terrible movie. And on top of that as well, we might know Alan Rickman for appearing in the greatest Christmas film of all time, which, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is...
Love Actually.
No, it's Die Hard, you fools. Love Actually is fine. Right, yeah, no, we've got 2 out of 3 at least. Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape were both cast by JK Rowling. There is a third one that was cast by the author for that first movie. Hands in the air. Any guesses as to who it might be? Anyone? No? I'll give you a clue, guys. We're talking about one of the biggest characters in the whole thing.
Hagrid.
Hagrid, yes. Was that what you were going to say, my friend? Robbie Coltrane is Hagrid, absolutely. What was your house? Hufflepuff, why not? Yeah, 10 points to Hufflepuff. Bravo, very good job. Yeah, Robbie Coltrane as Rubeus Hagrid. So Robbie Coltrane, again, was quite well known in the 80s and 90s, more so for appearing in British television series, often playing quite comic characters, but occasionally playing quite big, scary characters, so it made sense that he played Hagrid, who from a distance is a bit large and intimidating, but then you get to know him, and he's actually one of the most comic, most funny characters in all of Harry Potter. So well done, my friends. Your characters are Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, and Rubeus Hagrid, and we're all cast by JK Rowling for that very first movie. And with that, we can move on. We're going to start making our way down this path behind us, my friends. And we'll stop and talk a little bit about this now. So is it a holiday to Edinburgh for yourselves as well? Yeah. Very good, very nice. And have you been up before, or is this...
Yeah, I've been here for work this time. Never to look yet.
स्नेप और हैग्रिड गेस कर लिया था, बोला नहीं, बोलने वाला था।
Mary King's Close? Yeah. That's a very spooky one. Yeah, that's how it started in the tour guiding business. It wasn't Mary King. It was doing a ghost tour at Southbridge Vaults, which are very nearby, and it's a similar sort of affair. Candle lit tour and sort of like going around pointing at things, seeing where ghosts are. It took doing that job for me to realise I don't think I believe in ghosts. It's only so many times that you can like. Sorry, yeah, guys, we're just standing up against the wall just here. You know, there's only so many times that you can be like standing in a room, just like pointing up to a windowsill and being like, "There's a presence up there." He looks down, he just stares, and people will be like, "Oh yes, I feel him there." You just have to be. There's nothing there, guys. It's just a windowsill. Anyway, sorry, folks. If we just stand ourselves against the wall, we want to be talking about Edinburgh Castle, which we can just about see at the top just here. This is the other building that we know helped to inspire Hogwarts. There's a couple of details that were borrowed from Edinburgh Castle, but we cannot see those details today. So detail number one was the idea for a big stadium beside the castle. The idea for the Quidditch pitch, where the kids go to play their wizard sport once a month, where you'll hear the sounds of music and cheering coming away from on these particular occasions. This was actually taken from the big stadium that gets set up beside Edinburgh Castle for the Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which is a huge show that tends to take place across the month of August in this city. Every single night throughout the month of August, there will be a big show in a big stadium that gets set up on the Esplanade, so the big kind of car park area leading up to the main gates. There will be a big stadium set up there most summers, and then regimental bands will arrive from all across the world to put on their various routines to each other. There will be a big firework display every night. The sounds of cheering, of music, of bagpipes, so many bagpipes. You can hear them from every corner of the city, so you can. But this idea for a big noisy stadium beside the castle, this is what we understand inspired the idea for the Quidditch pitch beside Hogwarts. This is your first big similarity between Edinburgh Castle and Hogwarts. But the other thing that we understand was taken from Edinburgh Castle was the idea for the giant lake beside Hogwarts. So we're all familiar with the giant lake, I'm sure. I think it might be called the Black Lake in the American translations. This is where you'll find the giant squid, and it's also where a whole host of mer people are known to dwell. The lake gets explored a little bit more in Book 4, Goblet of Fire. So this idea for a big lake beside the castle, we understand this was taken from the Nor Loch, which used to sit on the northern side of Edinburgh Castle. Nor Loch translates to North Lake, so it was on the opposite side of the castle from where we are just now, where Princess Street Gardens and Edinburgh Waverley Station can currently be found. If you're in that area later on, you might notice that the landscape is shaped much like a basin, with big steep embankments going up on every single side, and the reason that the landscape is like that is because that whole area used to be underwater. However, I'll be honest, my friends, the Nor Loch was famously not a very pleasant location in this city, because it existed over 300 years ago, before we had underground piping and flushing toilets in Edinburgh. You can probably tell where I'm going with this. So Edinburgh was a very densely populated city. You had families of about 10 to 15 people, all living in rooms that were about the same size as these spaces you can see behind you just here. They weren't big spaces, and instead of having a flushing toilet, you had a bucket in the corner of the room that would steadily fill up with the household nastiness over the course of the day. Once that bucket is just about overflowing, it was generally one of the younger family members' jobs to have to empty that bucket, and you would do that by picking it up, carrying it over to the window, and tipping it out into the streets down below. The thing is, Edinburgh is a city that is built on hills and slopes, so all of that muck would then land on the slopes and drip on down into the valleys down below. So on the northern side of the city, that valley bottom was the Nor Loch, okay? So it was a disgusting sewage-filled bog, friends. More the Brown Lake than the Black Lake, if you catch my meaning. It was a disgusting location. So they decided to drain the Nor Loch in the mid-18th century, and then Edinburgh City Council would discover that the soil found underneath was actually very lush and fertile and perfect for the planting of these glorious flower beds. So if you're in that area later on enjoying a picnic, just bear that in mind, I suppose. Now, let's explore this area a bit more, shall we, friends? We're going to go off and around to the right. We have one more name to see on this far wall over here. You used to have the correct birth and death dates of the character Sirius Black as the name was there. Anybody there? Thank you very much. Round we come, friends, and yeah, just sticking to the path as much as possible. Thank you very much, friends. Round we come. Gather up, gather up, gather up. The next area that we will be talking about, my friends, is this name up on the top left just here. I'm hoping we all just about recognise this gentleman's name, that of Thomas Riddle. So this is the grave that is understood to have inspired the Muggle name for the Dark Lord himself, Tom Marvolo Riddle, aka Lord Voldemort. Now, it's worth pointing out, JK Rowling would have definitely had the name Voldemort before she had the name Tom Riddle. The name Voldemort is in fact derived from the French Voldemort. I don't suppose anyone remembers their French lessons from school and wants 10 house points. What does Voldemort translate to in French? Hands in the air, any guesses? Anybody? Something of death, madam, is correct. I'll say that's 5 house points. Do you think you know Vol? Nope. Say again?
Flight.
Flight, 5 points each. Very well done, my friends. What was your house, madam? Your Hogwarts house? Gryffindor, of course, cool. 5 points to Gryffindor for yourself, and Hufflepuff, and 5 points to Hufflepuff. 5 each, very well done, my friends. Good job. Yeah. Voldemort does indeed translate to flight of death. It can also be translated to theft of death as well, and both of these are quite accurate to the character of Voldemort. He is a character who has tried to fly away from death. He's tried to steal himself away from death through the creation of his Horcruxes. You can also interpret it in a more literal sense as well, that Voldemort is a character who flies and he brings death with him. Either way, we already had a name for the Dark Lord, and then it was understood the character needed a Muggle name from before he became the most evil wizard of all time, and this is when Rowling happens upon the name Thomas Riddle and sees it as being absolutely perfect. In particular, the surname Riddle is again very accurate to the character of Voldemort. He is a riddle. He is a puzzle that the heroes have to solve in order to defeat him. However, you can see traditionally the surname Riddle is spelled differently to how it appears in the Harry Potter books and films. Here, the surname is spelled R-I-D-D-E-L-L, whereas in Harry Potter, the spelling of the surname is as you would normally spell the word Riddle, R-I-D-D-L-E. And there's a very important reason as to why the name is spelled as it is in the Harry Potter saga, to do with a particular scene in one of the books and the films. 10 house points. Why is it that the name had to be spelled as it is?
The anagram.
The anagram, very good. I'll give that to yourself, my friend. What was your Hogwarts house?
Hufflepuff.
Hufflepuff, cool. And have an extra 5 points for knowing what an anagram is. 15 points to Hufflepuff, bravo. Very well done indeed. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. We can hopefully all remember that scene towards the end of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry has first encountered Tom Riddle in the flesh, believing he and Tom Riddle to be friends. Riddle picks up Harry's wand and sketches out his name in golden letters in the air, Tom Marvolo Riddle, and then he waves the wand, and before Harry's eyes the letters all rearrange themselves. It turns out that this name is what we call an anagram for the phrase, I am Lord Voldemort. So it's the big reveal. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I remember reading that as a 10-year-old boy, and my eyes just popped out of my skull. Literally rolled away across the floor. It was actually quite painful. Now, I should point out that the name Tom Marvolo Riddle absolutely is an anagram for I am Lord Voldemort, if you are reading Harry Potter in English. But let's face it, folks, Harry Potter is a very popular book series, one of the most popular on the face of the earth. As such, it has been translated into a great many different languages. And in fact, if you read Harry Potter in a different language, you may actually find that one of the Dark Lord's names has changed so that the anagram trick can still work at the end of Chamber of Secrets. And honestly, my friends, some of these name changes are really quite fun. For example, we were talking briefly about the French earlier on. I don't suppose there's anyone here who's read Harry Potter in French and remembers the Dark Lord's Muggle name in French. Oh, fantastic, my friends. Please do reveal the Dark Lord's Muggle name in French. Oh, it's okay, my friends, it's okay.
Voldemort in French.
Yes, his Muggle name. It's not Tom Riddle, it's Tom something else. Jidusau, very good. What? Hufflepuff, right, my friend? Yeah. 10 points to Hufflepuff. Very well done. Very well done. The name is indeed Tom Jidusau. I don't suppose we remember the middle name? No, that's totally fair, my friends. So in the French translation of Harry Potter, the Dark Lord's Muggle name changes to become Tom Elvis Jidusau, which is the best name for Voldemort I've ever heard in my life. Like, I love the Jidusau, it's very French, it's very fun to say, but the middle name is not Marvolo, it's Elvis. That is the best name for Voldemort I've ever heard in my life. On top of that as well, though, if you read Harry Potter in Chinese, in Mandarin, my understanding is, again, the language in the Far East is very, very different to that of the West. It is so different that you will struggle to find anagrams in the Chinese language, because functionally, the language does not work in a way where you can rearrange the characters to make new words words and phrases. The language cannot really be anagrammed. So instead, over there, they had to spell the name phonetically. They sound it out as Tom Riddle, and then there's a little star beside the name, and at the bottom of the page, there is one big footnote that explains what an anagram is to the Chinese reader. So, you know, it's an educational experience, as well as a cracking read. Now, we should talk about some of the similarities you get between the riddles represented here and the riddles of Harry Potter. Similarity number one is a rather basic one we may have already spotted. That is that there are, in fact, 2 Tom Riddles on this gravestone, much like in Harry Potter. You might remember the character of Tom Marvolo Riddle is technically Tom Jr. He takes his namesake from his Muggle father, Tom Sr. So this is your first similarity, the presence of the father and son Toms. But the other big thing that these riddles here are known to share in common with the riddles of Harry Potter is that they were very, very wealthy Muggle families. I believe it's book 4, Goblet of Fire, where we first hear all about the riddles, and it says they are a very wealthy family. They live in a big mansion outside of the village of Little Hangleton. They've got butlers and maids and a gardener called Frank, who we might remember in that opening chapter. But meanwhile, if we look at the lineage of this family here, we will find that they are descended from a 14th century baron by the name of Sir Walter Riddle, and their lineage tended towards jobs in banking, in finance, and in law. So they had a lot of very well-paying careers over the years, and in fact, if you explore Edinburgh further, you'll find a few bits of property named after the Riddle family and that used to belong to them. Most notably, up near Edinburgh Castle, there's a well-preserved street called Riddle's Court that used to belong to this family and is now a visitor's attraction. You can go along there and see what life was like in the city a few centuries ago if you choose to, and it says quite a lot for how rich this family was that they have property named after them so close to Edinburgh Castle, because historically, the closer you live to the castle, the more money you are going to have. So this was a very wealthy family indeed, but being honest, my friends, they are not remembered for their own lineage as much anymore. Now this here grave gets visited several times an hour due to their association with the most evil wizard of all time. So there's been a lot of Harry Potter fans coming down here over the years, and I assume most of them must be Slytherins and Death Eaters, because they do tend to leave flowers and love notes beside this grave, professing their love for the dark side. I'm not kidding when I say love notes, incidentally. A few Valentine's days ago, there appeared overnight a litany of heart-shaped cards down here, all professing their love for Voldemort and requesting to join the Dark Lord's army. So yeah, this grave gets visited quite a lot by Harry Potter fans, and I'll tell you guys this final detail. Said grave here is visited most of all around about midnight on October 31st, Halloween, my friends. This is when all the Harry Potter fans in town would gather together. They'd all be wearing cloaks and they would be wielding wands. They would descend down in front of this grave, divide themselves into pairs, and then take it in turns to have pretend duels in front of a grave saying Tom Riddle, like a great big bunch of nerds. I've been one myself. It's actually really fun. Anyway, friends, we're going to move on out very soon, but in the meantime, if anyone does wish to take a photograph of the original Tom Riddle's grave, now is the time. Please do take your pictures. I'll be just around the side, just there, so when you're all ready to go, just head back round and we'll move on. Okay?